Hi, my friends. It's Nic Leobold, and this is another edition of Nic Leobold Live. And I hope you're doing well. Today's edition, or this edition, because I'm planning on doing several broadcasts today, is concerning the unemployment rate, the official unemployment rate versus the actual real unemployment rate. And as Peter Schiff and John Williams of Shadow Stats and many other libertarian economists have already gone into, the official unemployment rate, as published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, is grossly inaccurate and basically just total fraudulent propaganda, which the administrations and the executive branch and Congress and the establishment always use to pretend that the economy is okay and that that people are doing well, when in fact the economy is not okay and a lot of people are actually suffering. But what I want to discuss right now is the fact that the unemployment rate is actually even much, much higher even than most of the libertarian economists like Peter Schiff and John Williams of Shadow Stats say. Because I think the upper limits of Peter Schiff's and John Williams' estimates of the real unemployment rate range from 15 or maybe even 20%. But during the Great Depression, historians say that the unemployment rate was 25%, and I could easily see that it was probably even higher than that. That's just the consensus estimate of Great Depression unemployment, which is always interesting to think about, because when you think about the official 25% Great Depression unemployment rate, what that actually also is saying is that 75% of the people of working age or working ability were employed. So 75% of the country, according to the establishment, was still working during the Great Depression, which is a very interesting thing to think about, because that's saying that a large majority of all workers were still getting by and doing well, and with the deflation, their purchasing power was very, very high. So 75% of the population was doing well during the Great Depression. That's something to think about and something to consider, and also think about as far as today goes. But the interesting thing that I have to say about the inflation rate, both by the official BLS number and also by libertarian economists, is that I believe that the unemployment rate is actually much, much higher than anyone is saying. I believe that the real unemployment rate, when you factor in everyone who is underemployed or not working and could be working, and would want to work if the economy was welcoming and good, the real unemployment rate is above 40%. Above 40%. Yes, I've seen a report several years ago which stated that real unemployment, when you count everyone, when you count the several million people who are in prison or jail mostly because of unjust laws, most of the people who are in prison and jail, at least a high percentage of them, are there unjustly because of political crimes or victimless crimes. So you have to put a majority of the 2.5 million people locked up under the heading of the unemployed. And when you factor in all the people that are not working, because I saw this report several years ago that it said that 45% there's 45% unemployment, and I can believe it, because the mainstream media and the politicians are saying how wonderful everything is. We all love each other. What a wonderful world. We're doing. We have a long way to go, but we have a strong foundation. I mean, what they say is utterly dishonest, because the economy is not doing well. There are closed businesses and real estate vacancies all over the place, even here in Manhattan, New York, and it's very hard with all the regulations to get to do any kind of simple work. Like, I was interested in driving an Uber car part-time, like a couple of days a week or 3 days a week. And when I looked into it, even for the Uber corporate regulations, not to mention the government and state regulations, but even the Uber regulations were kind of a hindrance to me easily doing that work, because Uber has all sorts of restrictions on exactly what kind of cars and trucks and SUVs you can drive and cannot drive, which really stymies people who want to make an entry level into that industry. If you want to buy a really used car or truck at a low price and offer transportation services through Uber or Lyft, Lyft's limit on the year model for cars is 2004 and Uber is 2006, but it also has to pass the Taxi and Limousine Commission regulations and inspection. So buying a used car or truck to drive for Uber or Lyft is a very iffy proposition. When you think that a lot of people would do this as an entry level into the workforce, but not only are the city and state regulations onerous, but the corporate regulations are onerous too. So there are so many impediments to people entering the labor market. Like, for instance, I used to work on eBay, selling merchandise through eBay and also selling Liberty Dollars when Liberty Dollar was still in full swing, before the FBI and Secret Service and Treasury Department raided Liberty Dollar. Liberty Dollar was a big business and thriving, and I was selling merchandise and also Liberty Dollar pieces and souvenirs through eBay. And my experience with eBay was that eBay as a corporation, along with PayPal, really made it tough for a lot of its members, its business members, to do business, and would without hesitation, they would impose a lot of limitations and exclusions on the things you could do on their eBay platform. There's a lot of banned merchandise which is not reasonable. For instance, they ban Nazi paraphernalia. I'm not a big enthusiast of Nazi paraphernalia or books, but I mean, eBay bans books. So I mean, give me a break. This is supposed to be America. We're supposed to have free expression and a free playing field for education and philosophical and intellectual inquiry. And eBay is banning the sale of certain books. That's scary. That's really scary that a company would ban the sale of books in America. But eBay bans all sorts of things. And so it's not just the government and the state and the cities that are stifling business and commerce. It's also a lot of corporations who, for whatever political or social reason, they want to control everything we do. But as I was pointing that out just to show how difficult it is, even when you want to be an entrepreneur and work for yourself, how many roadblocks there are to people participating in the economy and participating in commerce, trade, and business, because the obstacles are so onerous and difficult and off-putting that it quickly discourages you from engaging in a significant amount of business. It's very discouraging. If you want to start business or start any kind of work on your own, being your own boss, all these regulations, taxes, and restrictions are extremely discouraging. And I did see that report that said that the real unemployment rate was 45% when you include everyone, including prisoners and including all the adults who are discouraged or who just have given up for a long period of time, or who don't work for other reasons. So the unemployment rate could possibly be well over 40%. percent, like 45%, when you count everyone who doesn't work, who is otherwise able to work physically. So I think that John Williams and Peter Schiff and other libertarian economists, even the libertarian economists, are vastly underestimating the real rate of unemployment. And like we all know that the Bureau of Labor Statistics, their statistics are totally fraudulent because they're just a propaganda arm of the government and the politicians. So think of that, 45% unemployment rate, or over 40%, which means that like 60 or 55% of people are still gainfully employed, which is, barely a majority. But I believe that conditions now, at least for leading a meaningful life, I believe that conditions now are actually worse than the Great Depression. I believe that this is a worse depression than the Great Depression, and this situation is going unreported even by the libertarians and even by the free market anarchists. We are living through a Great Depression, and it's not being reported, and people are not even aware because of all the distortions in the economy and the intelligentsia and the media and education. People are not aware that we're in a long-term depression because a lot of people's lives are being ruined because they can't participate in the economy. They can't earn a meaningful amount of money, and they can't build a meaningful life and a meaningful future for themselves and a prospective family because taxes, regulations, and restrictions and prohibitions are so onerous and so discouraging to people who would otherwise work or be entrepreneurs and build their own business. So I think it's an interesting reality to consider that we have been in a depression, and we're continuing to be in a long-term structural depression in our economy. And also interesting to think about whether the unemployment rate is actually 40% or higher, maybe 45%. That's an interesting thing to think about. Not many other people are talking about it. So I think this is valuable new information for libertarians and free market economists and free market anarchists and philosophers to consider, that the unemployment rate could be drastically higher than what is commonly discussed, even in libertarian circles. It's interesting to, like I said, about the 25% Great Depression unemployment rate. It was probably higher, but even if it was 20, I mean, it's there's two ways to think about it. 25% is very high, but 75% employed is a large majority that's still employed and still living a good life. So maybe the Great Depression's severity was overstated by historians, and maybe it really wasn't that bad. And maybe what we're living through right now is actually much worse than it ever was during the Great Depression, which is something to think about. So it's very interesting to consider that we're in a depression now, and life is good, life is great, but still things could be so much better if the government and the corporatocracy and the establishment would let people be free and leave them alone and stop trying to steal all our property constantly with, bit by bit, taxes everywhere you look and regulations everywhere you look. Things could be so much better. I mean, if we had the estimates from libertarian economists that if we had had liberty for the past 100 years, that now the size of the American economy would be like 50 or 60 trillion dollars. Like, we would be untoldly much more prosperous and we would have our lives would be so much unbelievably better if we had had a free market and liberty for the past 100 years instead of the drastic socialism that we've been living under, and that has been slowly eating away at all our prosperity. Imagine that. I mean, instead of a $20 trillion economy, imagine if the economy was 3 times bigger, according to that estimate. If we had had liberty and free markets, for the past century. Socialism is a very, very sad thing. Statism is a very, very sad thing. And what these politicians and the establishment and all the government parasites are doing to us, and the corporatocracy, it's a very, very sad thing. It also hurts them. It's not just that it hurts the small people or the middle class people. It also hurts the people at the top, because life is spiritual, and if you hurt other people, it comes back to you. Karma is real, and it affects rich people also. And I can't imagine that rich people get ahead by diminishing the entire world with all the pollution, with all the violence, with all the suffering, with all the security, with all the bloodshed that it causes. I can't imagine that the rich elite really benefit in any meaningful way from statism and from oppression and from greed, because they would be rich anyway. So they're just hurting themselves, creating all this unhappiness. So it's very sad, but we have to work to educate people. And I think word is getting around and word is getting out, and people are learning and people are becoming more enlightened. And so I still have a lot of hope, because, this is with the internet, we really are in the dawn of a new age of creativity, engineering, progress, and development of all sorts of technologies that are going to make our lives, even better. But we also have to recognize where we are and our current situation, and be realistic about our current situation. And our current situation stinks next to what it could be. So we have to be very concerned, and also concerned about the growth of socialism and statism, because that's an existential danger to everyone's life, because socialism and statism are just an utter disaster and just lead to ruin for everyone, just like what's happening in Venezuela right now. So, there is a lot of reason to be hopeful, but we also have to be mindful of our true situation. And I think that the real unemployment rate is something that we should, a fact we have to face, and consider whether, if 45% of America is unemployed, the real numbers, no wonder there's so much social strife and political strife in our country, because people don't have a chance to build a life for themselves. And that's an extreme important issue that we have to bring to the attention of all our neighbors and friends and colleagues, and we have to put our foot down and force more liberty and more peace, down the throats of the politicians. I don't want to say force, because libertarians and anarchists don't really believe in force, but I mean, we believe in self-defensive, retaliatory force if we're threatened or oppressed. So we really have to put our foot down in a lot of different clever ways and fight for liberty, through making it as difficult as possible for the establishment, the government, and corporations to continue trying to oppress us. We have to make their lives, very, very difficult. And we have to be very clever and smart about how we build our own lives as individuals and families and small businesses. I'm very hopeful. So I think that the liberty movement has made tremendous progress over the past 15 years. But we have a long way to go, and things are pretty serious now. I mean, like, it's pretty hard to earn a living if you want to earn an honest living. There's a lot of hoops you have to jump through, and I think the situation is pretty serious. And I think a lot of people, like a really large number of people, are struggling. I think there's a lot of people are struggling, and life is very hard for a lot of people, and a lot of people are not able to get to build a real valuable life, and so we have a lot of work to do. So that's my broadcast right now, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please like this video and please share it, and please leave comments in the comments section, because I love free expression, and I always try to respond to constructive comments, and I always leave the comments section pretty much totally open, and I don't want to censor anything. So please leave comments and like this video, and I'll see you at the next video. This is Nic Leobold for Nic Leobold Live. Thank you for listening, and have a great weekend. Good night.